Welcome to Spectral Shadows. This is the place where the stories don't just haunt your mind, they follow you into the dark. Before the whispers begin, tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it? Midnight? Or closer to the hour when shadows move on their own? If you're brave enough to continue, prove it. Like this video, subscribe to Spectral Shadows and leave a comment with your time and location, so we'll know exactly where to find you. Now, let's open the door to tonight's nightmare. Story number 1. I don't know where I am. I don't know when I am. All I know is the last place I remember being was Highway 74, somewhere deep in the Appalachians, trying to beat the storm. The rain came down so fast it was like driving through a car wash. My GPS froze right after I took the exit for gas. Not that it mattered. There was no station, no buildings, no signs, just forest. Thick trees swallowed both sides of the road. My headlights barely made a dent in the dark. Then the road got narrow. Gravel turned to mud. My cell had no service, just a mocking, searching. In the corner of the screen, I should have turned back, but I couldn't. There was nowhere to turn. I drove for what felt like hours before the trees opened up, and I saw it. A crooked sign with one flickering bulb and peeling white letters, Pine Bend Motel Vacancy. It looked abandoned. A one-story strip of maybe 8 rooms, paint blistered, roof sagging. The whole place leaned, like it was too tired to stand. But the lights were on in the office, barely, and at that point, anything was better than sleeping in the car. I killed the engine and stepped out. The rain had stopped, but the air was wrong. Too still, too quiet. No wind, no bugs, no sound. Like the forest was holding its breath. Inside the office was even worse. The walls were yellow with age and smoke. The counter warped from water damage. It smelled like mildew and something metallic. A bell sat on the desk, dusty and untouched. I rang it. A moment passed. Then another. I was about to leave when I heard a slow shuffle from the back room, like something dragging its feet. And then she appeared. An old woman, or something wearing the shape of one. Her skin was gray, almost translucent. Her hair hung in damp, clotted strands. Her eyes were clouded, but locked straight on me like she could see through me. "You made good time," she said. Her voice was wet, like something gurgling up from a drain. I didn't know what to say. "You'll be in room 3, she continued, sliding a key across the desk with fingers that were far too long. "Don't open the curtains." That's all she said. No ID, no payment. Just turned and walked into the dark. Room 3 was cold. No matter how long I was in there, I couldn't warm up. The heater rattled, but nothing came out. The walls were thin enough that I could hear the man in room 4 sobbing quietly for hours. At least I thought it was a man. I closed the bathroom door without turning on the light. The mirror was warped like water-stained glass, and my reflection lagged a half-second behind. I sat on the bed. That's when I noticed the window. The curtains were closed, but they moved, barely, like someone on the other side was breathing against them. I didn't move for a long time. I just stared, and they kept swaying, softly, like lungs inhaling, exhaling. I told myself it was the wind, even though there was no wind. Around 3 a.m. the phone rang, that old rotary phone on the wall, dusty, dead-looking, let out a single shrill ring that nearly made me piss myself. I answered it, heart pounding, static. Then a voice. "Don't let them know you're awake." Click. I didn't sleep. I didn't move. I sat in the dark, holding my breath, listening to whatever was moving around just outside the door. Scraping, shuffling, breathing. I thought about leaving. I really did. But when I looked outside, there were no cars, no road, no forest, just a long row of identical motel rooms stretching into the dark. Room 4, room 5, room 6, room 7, then again, room 4, room 5. They were looping. I opened the door to my room. The hallway was there now, not the parking lot. A hallway that should have been outside, and it was longer than it could possibly be. Doors lined both sides, some open, some cracked, some covered in something thick and dark. I started walking. I don't know why. Maybe because staying still felt worse. The doors were numbered wrong. Room 9, then room 3 again. Then a door marked in tally marks. Dozens, maybe hundreds, scratched into the wood. One of the doors wasn't a door at all, just black, like a hole torn into the wall. From one of the rooms I heard scratching, not on the floor, but the ceiling, above me, and a voice, childlike. "Help me, he's in the walls." I ran. I don't know how long I ran. At some point I ended up back in my room, the real one, or a copy of it. The bed was made, the light was off. The curtains weren't moving anymore. I thought maybe I'd hallucinated the whole thing. Maybe I was just exhausted. But then I saw it, on the mirror, a handprint, from the inside of the glass, and underneath it, written backwards in streaky red letters, "You never checked out." That was last night, or 100 nights ago. I don't know anymore. There are no clocks, no phones, just the ringing. Sometimes I hear new guests arriving. I try to warn them. I pound on the walls. I scream through the vents. I see their shadows through the curtains. But they never hear me. They always stay the night. And now, so do I. Story number 2. Out of all of the cases that I've had as a criminal investigator, this one is probably the one I tell to only a few people, though I guess that wouldn't quite pan out, since I'm typing this now. I've had my fair share of freaks and creeps in my day. Serial killers that collected pieces of their victims, sick freaks, perverts, all of that. But this case is different. To save my own ass and not get in trouble, I'll be switching names and keeping the location vague, though I doubt that will do me any favors due to how nutty and unique this case is. For reference, I work within a state that has lots of forests, mountains, and nature that creeps around into the cities and towns, the type to become one of those hallmark fall town during the fall seasons and winter wonderland, covered in snow and ice during the cold months a vast majority of was, and to be truthful, still native land, and as such is kept in condition by the local tribes and conservationists. With this, of course, is a very easy way for people to get lost and potentially killed within these forests, so there have been plenty of meetings and such to prevent the amount of inevitable losses. Though recently there have been a large string of murders happening in recent months. Young adults or hikers would go into the forest and not come back, only to resurface brutally killed. All of them have the same sort of markings, causes of death. Take, for example, the first victim, a 30-year-old man named Charles. He was found dead near a riverbed. His entire torso seemed to be ripped out. His organs that he had left hung out from the hole that used to be his body, and his limbs covered in bruises and deep gashes that resembled claws. Everyone, including me, thought he was attacked by a bear or a large animal that had contracted rabies, since they're very common within those areas. But after closer inspection, me and the other investigator would come to find out that wasn't the case. More and more bodies would show up. Some would have entire limbs bitten off or half of their body just missing. It was some sickening shit, and the local department soon realized that they had a lot more than bears on their hands. That's when me and my partner, Miller, would be put onto the case. Miller was a younger man, about 25 years old, charming and handsome as the elderly woman and some of the younger girls would point out. He was new to the town and had transferred to our neck of the woods when the opportunity came about. Nice kid, though the moment he came couldn't have been any worse. Another body showed up, deep in the forest, dangling from a thick tree branch. The same as the rest, the torso almost devoured whole, and the right arm missing. Luckily for the crew involved, we didn't have to worry about the large crowds that would pile up whenever a new body was discovered closer to town. All the nearby residents would come and watch, weirdly enough. Curious tweens and teens would try and sneak a peek of the body and be sick right after seeing the disaster, and older folks would say a silent prayer as if their words would help guide the lost soul to the pearly gates up above. Me and Miller stood at the edge of the police tape. Silence filled the air besides the shuttering of the camera for evidence and the crunch of fallen dead leaves. No one spoke. The same despondent look of, "Let's get this over with," was wrapped around their faces. It was just another day of cleaning up organs and looking at the mutilated faces of the dead. There's no way that another person could manually put the victim in the tree like that. Miller muttered breathlessly, and he was right. The branch that held the victim's body was at least a good couple feet off the ground. No person was able to hoist the body onto the branch like that unless they had gear. And even then, what was even the purpose of that? None of this was making any sense, but then again, this entire string of mishaps were just illogical. "Aye, come take a look at this," one of the forensics men called out to the two of us, his gloved hands waving us over as he kneeled on the ground over something. Upon closer inspection, it was a large book. It was worn with age, probably older than me, and a vast majority of members in the department itself. A strange symbol was embedded into the leather binding, colored in with a now faded shade of gold. "Looks like something y'all would need. Smells like shit, but it seems important." The man shook his head. He wasn't wrong. The book smelled like something that had died long ago, rotting in the very back of a library, where no one touches the books and they're left to decay in the shelves for longer than needed. After the book was sealed into an evidence bag, Miller taking a closer look at it with gloved hands and a crossed expression. "Haven't seen anything like this before. I thought it was some sort of Satanist symbol at first, but this looks a whole lot different." "Are you saying you're an expert at some weird demonology stuff, Miller?" "Not at all. I think my hours of binge-watching horror movies would have lent me a clue as to what it could have been." The look on my face seemed to be enough for him to chuckle and take back what he said. "Anyway, we should probably get a look at this once we get back to the station. It seems important." After the initial cleanup, me and Miller stood around the book in the evidence room. The book itself, in the blinding fluorescent lights, showed its age. The leather that bound the book together was basically decaying. Nothing like the fake stuff you'd find in some bookstore. The pages were a deep yellow and beige color, coated with mysterious stains. This thing was a lot older than I had thought. Probably from the 1800s, if I were to guess. Probably even further back. How the hell did the victim even get this sort of thing? No time to waste. Let's see if this thing could lend us a hand on this investigation. Miller carefully opened the book. It started off as most published books do, but when he focused on the words on the paper, he took pause. "What the fuck does this say?" Latin. All of it was in Latin, but from what we could see, it was some type of book containing things such as faces, anatomy, and a whole bunch of other stuff that you would typically see somewhere in a biology book, or something related to evolution, but it was for something different. The people, or really things I should say, weren't human. They had digitigrade legs. The legs themselves morphed right where the knee would be for us and became what I can only assume to be goat legs or something of the like. Their feet were hooved, hands ending in long nails, or claws, and from the colored ink that was left, varying skin tones from pinks and reds to greens and blues. Hell, there were even sections that included different horn shapes and tail shapes and sizes, though that information was only for the first 80 or so pages before being separated by a page and a small title within the center, a separate entry. There's no way that the victim could understand this. Even if they just looked at the pictures, they wouldn't grasp what the text was even saying. Miller shook his head and closed the book. He seemed disappointed, perhaps over the fact that we couldn't yet find a lead to all of these deaths. Calm down, Miller. I have a friend that can read Latin. I'll send it over to him and try to see what we can get out of it. You're not messing with me, right? Miller whipped his head to look at he with distrusting eyes. In what day and age can someone casually read Latin? A linguist, Miller. The shift in Miller's face was almost instant, turning from frustration to embarrassment and clarity, all in one neat package. Right. We'll go ahead and contact him. If it's anything important, we'll bring it forward. Miller nodded before leaving the room quietly. As he left, I stood there in that quiet room for what seemed like minutes, looking back down at that beat-up book. Something about it compelled me to keep looking, to keep discovering what I couldn't understand. And that was the point where I think I took a path that wouldn't lead back to the reality I knew. The next section read like a journal entry, pages upon pages of notes, short paragraphs and so on, sprawled over copious amounts of pages until I uncovered more diagrams. These looked so much more different than the diagrams before. A lot more disturbing than I thought possible. It showed sickness, drawings of the same beings spotted within the earlier pages contained in large rooms with small cots, and loads of what I can only assume was Renaissance age or pre-modern medical tools and objects. There were barely any detailing within their faces, though some looked like they were in pain. Some doubled over and drawn vomiting something colored in red. The next page showed doctors working on a patient. The person, who is male due to his crotch being shown, was deathly skinny. His skeletal structure was practically visible with his skin, or the patches that he had left acting like a thin blanket to keep everything together. One of his limbs was drastically longer than the other. It was like the bone itself snapped, separated under all of their muscle and skin, and connected back together to create a much longer version of itself. None of the words made sense. I couldn't understand a word of what was being written, but I could understand one thing. It spoke of a disease, a plague. The next few pages were almost the same thing. Doctors standing over different patients of different ages, all experiencing varying symptoms. Things such as vomiting, aggression, extreme fear and isolation, sensitivity to light, and a bunch of other stuff I couldn't understand. Whatever the hell was happening, it was bizarre. There wasn't a chance in hell that this stuff was even real, let alone plausible. In what world is there beings with horns and tails and digitigrade legs? It was a load of bullshit in my eyes, a fake journal to scare kids. But there was this itch at the very back of my head that told me that I still needed to send it over, to understand what it was saying. Even if it didn't benefit the case whatsoever, I needed to know. Only a week had gone by after that. The contents of that book still itched at my head like a parasite, whispering the ideals and the sheer possibilities of what that journal could say. The town was starting to get even more antsy than ever before. The body count was now up to 12, and the department started to set up curfews and restriction zones in the forests. Many citizens were angry about some of their trails being closed down, or started to suspect the outcasts of being the forest cannibal, as they dubbed the killer. The sheriff decided to hold a town meeting in order to try and get everyone in line after an incident involving a local man assaulting a homeless man because he looked suspicious. Right. As everyone knows, many have lost their lives within the boundaries of the forest to an unknown person. It's caused a lot of heartbreak and mistrust within this community. Sheriff Smith Marin started, "But during these times, there have many of you that have acted completely out of line." He sounded like he was scolding children instead of a room of 4 grown men and women, some older than him. Frankly, it was quite disappointing to see various grown men and women argue in the way of capturing the suspected killer and bringing him to justice by beating on a homeless man who frankly couldn't harm a soul. Paranoia and the climbing suspense of these killings had drawn the townspeople to try and enact some sort of revenge on those they deem suspicious enough. As the sheriff kept talking, a woman burst into the hall, tears and sweat rolling down her face. "My babies! Please, you must find them!" She shrieked frantically, causing everyone to turn and look at her with pity, fear, and confusion. "Mrs. Dimitri, what?" "My sons. They went into the restricted zone closest to the neighborhood with some of their friends. I have no idea where they could have went." Silence. The sheriff's face twisted into horror as some of the officers stood up. It was only a small bunch of us. A small group of deputies that I can't remember the names of, me and Miller, Captain Overenthal, Chief Deputy Franklin, and the sheriff himself. There were plenty of us to handle what we had assumed as a singular man. "Deputies, stay here and make sure no one leaves this building. Everyone else come with me." His voice was as steady as it could, a mix of panic rising within his voice as he grabbed his coat and ran out the doors. The shouts of the rest of the people within the hall died down as all of us ran outside and jumped into our cars. The sheriff was the fastest out of all of us, basically peeling out of the dingy parking lot before any of us stepped foot in our own vehicles. Wind whistled past my ears as the group of officers surrounding me called out frantically. The flashlights we had on us were mediocre at best. But in the deep darkness that ate everything it touched, it was a sign. The sheriff's voice was the loudest out of all of us, his eyes wild and panicked as he tried to make as much noise as possible to see if any of the kids would be able to hear us. I was confused as to why he was like this. As much as we did stuff like finding children, he never seemed to be this messed up about it. But looking now, I realized that his own son was with that group on that night as well. A sudden scream west of us caught our attention, leading us to a smaller clearing within the forest itself. The scream came from one of the boys, no older than 11 years old. His arm was broken as he laid in the grass, rolling in pain and holding his arm as the blood soaked through his small blue jacket. He wailed that there was something huge that chased after the group, and he was the only one that got separated after he fell. Poor kid was a sobbing mess, but he seemed to be lucky, considering what would happen to some of his friends. Miller stayed back with him as we continued forward. The sounds of shouting and what I thought were tree branches snapping became clearer as we approached that thing. I must mention this before I continue, but I'm really unsure of how I did it. At one point, I turned on my body camera that I had just put on and set up properly before the meeting. It must have been during the struggle of getting out of the car and into the forest itself. If it wasn't for that, I don't think I would have even able to piece together what I know now. What greeted us when we reached that group was nothing that can compare to any horrifying experience I've ever had in my life. Nothing can and will be able to change that. The boys were all scattered around the forest floor, some injured with broken limbs and others bleeding from their heads. All of them were fully alert and looking at the creature in abject horror. One stood as tall as he could, waving a stick at the being, while the other dangled loosely from its grip. And that thing, Jesus, it was tall, almost 9 feet if I were to guess. Digitigrade legs that barely held itself up stood tall. Patches of what I assumed was fur clung onto the last bits of skin around its legs. Its skin was a deep red, with flecks of flesh and muscle sinew jutting out from the various open wounds on its body. And it wasn't like it was a lot of muscle either. That beast was almost skin and bone. Its chest didn't even have skin on it, showing an odd-looking rib cage with a still beating heart, lungs that slowly pulsed, and the remaining of what I can only assume were its organs. All of it seemed like it was rotting away, and it smelled like it, too. The putrid stench of a body that was floating in water for days on end penetrated the noses of everyone that came close enough. I could hear officers gagging as they covered their noses the best they could while hoisting their guns. I didn't get to see its face until it looked down at us. It looked terrified, as if it wasn't holding the unconscious body of a middle schooler, and terrified as if it didn't know what it was doing. Its features were confusing. I can't tell if it's from my memory actively blocking out the moment, or if it was simply like that in the first place. But its face was sunken in. Its teeth were sharp and stained red and yellow from blood, and simply rot. And its eyes, they were a dull purple, the misery and pain etched into each and every inch of its eyes as it looked at us, slowly moving a long clawed hand over its eyes. Then it spoke. Queso miserere. A rough, raspy voice spoke. It sort of sounded like a kid speaking when it was in trouble, its head low and body cowering. "Drop the body, now!" the sheriff shouted as he pointed his gun at the creature. "Step away from the children." "Tamis Surio." The creature looked at the child in its hands. The kid's right forearm was missing. A chunk of the body was missing. It dropped the boy, backing away from us. The other boy ran to his friend, frantically wrapping his arm with a sweater. "Neminem alium ledere volo, venter meos putrescit, sed fames perseverat." It continued to speak, backing away from the lights that shined on its face. It cowered in fear. Its wide eyes flickered between all of us. "Don't move. Stay down. Keep your hands where they are." The sheriff and officers kept shouting. All of their voices turned into a sea of words as the creature slowly stepped further and further away from the group. "Queso noli me ledere." Snap. A branch underneath the creature's foot broke, causing one of the officers close to me to fire a shot into the creature's shoulder. The wail of pain that it let out was something beyond loud. It was like a cross from a human scream and an inhuman bellow. The creature soon ran off. The thumping of its feet echoed throughout the forest as it fled. The stench of rot followed it as it vanished into the night. Silence followed. The small wheeze of one of the children snapped the rest of us back into reality. It was only the day after that I realized that I had the footage. I sent off a copy to the same linguist in order to translate it. And during that time I realized something. That creature had the same exact features I saw in the book. I couldn't just go into the station then and look at it again, but from everything that I remember, it was almost exactly like a reference image given in one of the starting chapter of the book. And that same way of it looked so sickly. It was just like the images shown in the second chapter. I couldn't stop thinking about that imagery. So in a moment of weakness and curiosity, I took the book back with me. It's not like they're gonna need it anyway. I was looking more into the pictures when I finally got the translations back, along with the video. And I'm really not sure if I should share this with the rest of the station, let alone anyone else in the town. We told the public that it was a mutated animal that fled, and we are actively looking for it to put it down for good. The boys themselves haven't said anything, since they've still been in the hospital being treated for their wounds. I doubt that they'll even speak about this beyond anyone else. And if they did, I doubt they'll be believed. But for what I found in the books, I don't think I believe it myself. It speaks about the bone structure of what they called the Demonlios species. The first part of the book goes into detail about the body's structure, the way different sins have differing body types, horn types, and tail types. I still thought it was a giant crock of shit, to be honest. There wasn't a single change in hell that it was real. But I then got to the section about the disease. It spoke about a plage that swept through the lands. Each subgroup experienced different symptoms and varying ways of how the infection took hold, based on what they guessed were genetic differences. The first sign of infection all around was severe vomiting and nausea, tremors, fear or aggression, and sensitivity to many lights and sounds. Very rarely did the infection reach the bloodstream, causing what I can only assume is sepsis, and take hold of the body. A vast majority of the time, it attacked what I'm still assuming is the endocrine system. After a significant amount of time, the body will grow and distort before basically dying with the brain and heart still functioning, causing the afflicted to either mutate or die. If I were to even believe this, this means that whatever or whoever is out there in the forest is one of those beings. God, I can't even imagine how it's feeling. Imagine your entire body rotting around you. You can't do a thing to stop it unless you either die or just mutate further enough to the point you don't even know what you're doing. And not to mention that it knew that something had happened to it. It begged for us to stop. Dear God, I remember watching the video translated and feeling the sensation of bile reach my throat. Please have mercy. I'm so hungry. I don't want to hurt anyone else. My stomach is rotting, but the hunger persists. Please don't hurt me. Those words make me feel ill, like I aimed a gun at some poor helpless soul that couldn't help being what it was. But the main thing that concerns me is if that thing was real. Where did it come from? How the fuck did it even get here? Is that a demon? Is hell real? I don't know. I have a migraine from all of this hitting me at once. If there's anyone that might be able to help me, please say something. I can't bear to be the only one to know this in this town. Everyone is acting like it's completely fine, and I know it won't be when the next incident happens. I just need someone to talk to about this. Story number 3. I'm not sure how to explain this, and to everyone I tell, they brush me off for being paranoid, which is understandable, considering I am very anxious. But I know for a fact, I am not making this up. It has happened to me various times and to many different degrees. So a couple months ago, when I was supposed to be packing to move away for college, I was laying on my bed and listening to music on my headphones while texting a friend. Something felt off, and I have no idea why, but I felt the need to pause my music and take off my headphones. At first I assumed I had heard my mom calling for me, but hadn't processed it. But with a few moments of silence, I could hear a light tapping right outside my window. My windows have blinds, and since my window faced the sun, I always kept them shut. My heart almost stopped, mainly because my room is on the second floor, and there are no trees by the window that could be moved by the wind to cause the tapping noise. The tapping wasn't sporadic or continuous. Whatever was out there would tap on my window 2 or 3 times. what I assume was listening for a reaction, then tapping again. I got unnerved but decided to ignore it, because I personally believe that if you pretend it doesn't affect you, it can't control you. After moving, I thought that would be it. I mean, I was moving countries, so whatever it was would likely not follow me, right? The next time I heard it, I was in my dorm. I had finished unpacking the little things I had brought from home. And since I'd come early, my roommate hadn't arrived yet. It was peaceful having my own space, but I couldn't help feeling overwhelmed by everything. I brushed it off as nerves from being away from my parents and practically everything I knew. It was late at night, and I shamefully was scrolling through any app on my phone to distract myself from the fact that I actually need sleep. At some point, I must have gotten bored because I put my phones down and closed my eyes to try to sleep. That's when I heard it again. There was a small window on the wall that my bed was against, and soft tapping insisted on making itself aware. I shut my eyes as naturally as I could, my attempt to fool the creature. The tapping continued. 1, 2, 3, pause. 1, 2, pause. 1, 2, 3, 4, pause. It continued for what felt like hours. I got myself to calm down, breathing slowly. It shouldn't have, but it felt even more unnerving this time because I was on the first floor of the dorm building. All I could think was, did I lock the window? Could the window even be locked? Did it want in? I let my thoughts wander for a moment, wishing it would end already. A part of me felt stupid for being so scared of tapping on a window. That's when I heard a loud singular bang against the window. I tensed before convincing myself it was just a dumb bird. I expected the tapping to continue, but it was done. No more tapping, no nothing. I didn't dare look at the window, just shutting my eyes and forcing myself to sleep. The next morning, I needed to assure myself that it was all a dream, or some part of my imagination that led me into freaking out about it. I decided to peer out the window, look for whatever it could be that made all that noise. I expected trees, maybe a dead bird. What I saw didn't satisfy my brain. There was nothing. No trees surrounding the window, no bird that died from hitting my window. It would happen sporadically from then on, like it timed its appearances for when I'd forget, and it wanted to remind me. I'm sure it wasn't just some figment of my imagination. I tried to Google what it could be, but all I got was temperature changes from day to night could cause the window to expand or shrink, making soft popping noises, which was a decent explanation, but it just felt so oddly timed, as if whatever it was planned its taps, planned when it would happen, when it would scare me most. It's been around 2 months since I last heard it. I can't help but wonder what it could be. Was it real? Or was I just paranoid and correlating these events together? It just all has so many coincidences and no explanation. I really hope that it got bored of my lack of reaction and is done tormenting me. Story number 4. My eyes fluttered open from a dreamless sleep, and I stared up into a blackness that was as empty as a starless sky. My breath stung my lungs and felt heavy as I drew it in, as though I were trying to suck the air from a wine bottle. A sheen of sweat slicked across my skin. Blinking into the blackness, I tried to remember where I was and when I had gone to sleep. My throat still ached, and the crackle in my cough reminded me that I had been ill. It had started as a tickle in my throat and spread into a dry cough. My skin had gone clammy, and a nagging ache in my bones fought against every movement. But I had refused to stop working, despite feeling under the weather that morning. The fever had crept in throughout the day, slow and merciless, and then I remembered the sudden faintness that had washed over me. The room had begun to spin, and I had toppled over. With no one else in the building, there had been no sense in crying for help. I blinked again into the utter blackness. Was this my sewing room? No, the sewing room had windows that overlooked the streets. I should have been able to see the glow from the lamps outside. This darkness was like nothing I had ever known. Every bone in my body ached, defying movement, screaming for a breath of cool, fresh air. I lifted my hand a few inches and jumped at the soft thunk of my knuckles, striking something hard. My other hand met the same resistance. I kicked out my feet. Thud, thud. More unyielding surface. Something was across the top of me. Was I under a table? I turned my head left, then right, blinking blindly against the nothingness. To my sides, I heard the echo of my own labored breathing bounce back at me. The air was damp, clinging to my lungs, feeding my cough. My ears rang from the silence, and the faint pounding of my heart filled the cramped space. Walls pressed against my sides, a solid surface pinned me from above. A sick realization crept through me as I accepted the horrifying truth. I was in a coffin. I tried to raise my fists to pound against the lid, but my arms couldn't fit between my chest and the wood. They stayed locked at my sides, adding to the unbearable claustrophobia. Panic flared in my chest. My boots lashed out wildly. A whimper slipped from my lips, rising into a shriek of terror and rage. My nails dug into the wood above me, clawing frantically. I felt them peel back, hot pain tearing through my fingertips. Blood trickled down my wrists, soaking my sleeves, making the coffin's lid slick. I thrashed, slamming my head against the top as I twisted, desperate to free at least one hand. The slickness of my own blood gave way, and I managed to slide my right hand upward along my chest until it pressed above my head. Now one hand lay pinned above me, the other trapped at my side. My lungs ached, each cough a violent spasm that heaved my chest upward. The force thrust my arm farther back until my shoulder snapped out of its socket. I screamed, the rawness of my throat tearing open with agony. Fire consumed my shoulder, my fingertips buzzing as if electricity raced through them. I tried to yank my arm back down, but it dangled uselessly above me in a grotesque mock salute. My free arm spasmed helplessly at my side, desperate to help. I gasped shallowly, choking on the dense air. It felt less like suffocating and more like drowning. Sweat soaked through my clothes and plastered my skin. I made one last, pitiful attempt to force the shoulder back into place, twisting against the coffin's side. My teeth clamped into my lip as pain ripped through me, but the joint refused to snap back. I screamed again. Blood welled in my mouth, metallic and bitter, puddling on my tongue. Tears streamed down my face and mingled with blood in the darkness. "Help me," I croaked, my voice weak, my strength unraveling. The darkness shifted before my eyes, like the mouth of a deep well yawning open beneath me. I felt myself leaning into it, tipping forward as though my body were weightless. My stomach lurched, my feet seemed to rise, and I plunged. I fell endlessly, hair twisting like snakes against my face. The abyss pulled me deeper, directionless, merciless. I opened my mouth to scream again, but instead it filled with the stale, suffocating air, thick as fog, choking me. My body convulsed, froth bubbling at my lips. My eyes stared unblinking into the void, desperate for a glimpse of light at the bottom of this endless well. Somewhere in my mind, I imagined the splash when I struck the water waiting below. I told myself it would be cool, soothing against my fevered flesh. It would wake me. It would save me. I thrashed harder, my forehead banging the coffin lid above, and then I smiled. I felt it. A cool drop slid down my face. Relief surged through me as I waited for the flood of well water to wash over me. But it never came. Instead, the beat of hot blood began running down into my eye. pooling until it spilled over my cheek and clogged my ear. But by then, I barely felt it. My shallow breaths stilled. My bleeding fingers fell open limply. My boots splayed outward, tapping softly against the coffin walls. My eyes, sticky with blood, remained open. They would stay open, expectant, until the coffin was opened again the next day. And though I would never taste the cool air again, my tombstone would be engraved with a warning. Or some whispered, a curse. The people shall be troubled at midnight and pass away. You've reached the end. But the shadows haven't left you. If this story unsettled you, prove you survived. Like this video, subscribe to Spectral Shadows, and leave a comment with the part that haunted you most. The darkness is always waiting, and so are we. Until next time, don't turn off the lights.